Good evening, everyone, and to those who are joining us once again, welcome back to live coverage from Florida's Space Coast. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this chapter of our live launch coverage this evening. We are once again broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Joining us once again, as was the case earlier this evening, Stephen Young running the technical operations of our broadcast, as well as doing some tracking tonight. Adam Bernstein popping in the live chat with our wonderful moderators to help keep the conversation kosher and moving forward. And Michael Kane, after working hard on the Falcon Heavy launch just a little bit ago, has the rest of the evening off. But if you haven't already checked out some of his launch photos from the previous Falcon Heavy launch, which you can see now an empty pad over at Launch Complex 39A after a successful Falcon Heavy flight supporting the USSF 52 mission. These are the X handles for Adam and Michael, our two ace photographers, so if you're not already, be sure to give them a follow. We're now T-minus 58 minutes, 44 seconds and counting to the launch of the second half of SpaceX's doubleheader on tap tonight. This is the Starlink 6-36 mission for SpaceX. This is the 43rd dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 11:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those joining in from around the world, that's 0401 UTC. You're taking a look at the pads of Launch Complex 39A and Space Launch Complex 40. Now minus one rocket on the left-hand side of your screen after, for those who are not with us, the successful launch of that Falcon Heavy rocket. This was the fifth time SpaceX launched a Falcon Heavy in 2023, and a successful second attempt to launch the military's X-37B orbital test vehicle on the seventh flight of the OTV program. Now on its way to begin its orbital mission, largely shrouded in secrecy. But we do know there's a whole host of seeds on board on behalf of NASA. It's part of its seeds experiment to test the impact of long-duration space flight on various types of seeds, a very important piece of building out our deep space human spaceflight program as we traverse farther into the cosmos, to the moon and Mars and eventually beyond. Of course, we need to know both how to grow things in space, as well as how radiation impacts the nutrients that grow in our food. And so the seeds experiment is an important piece of that. That is one of the payloads on board the X-37B, now about 2 hours into its mission. Last time X-37B flew was gone from Earth for a little over 900 days, so we'll have to wait and see how long the space plane is on orbit this time. Coming back to the mission at hand, in a little less than 20 minutes, the launch director will give the go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. Tonight's second launch, I should say. As was the case with the Falcon Heavy mission, SpaceX is not providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count in the case of the Falcon 9 rocket, but we have extensive experience, of course, covering the Falcon 9 and Starlink missions, so we will guide you through the countdown procedure and some of the visual milestones that we're looking for as we get further into the count. If you haven't already, a great way to help support what we do at Spaceflight Now. It's quick, easy, and free. If you just hit the like button, it allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this coverage to more folks who would like to join in for a live launch coverage on a fine Thursday evening. We're also powered by our wonderful channel members, folks like moderator Astro Joe, who is just shared a little generosity by gifting a Spaceflight Now membership to Darium Hernandez. Darium, if you haven't already, be sure to give Astro Joe a thanks in the live chat. And I see one of our other channel members, Mark Otto, has gifted 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thanks so much, both Mark and Astro Joe. Those going to Librac Productions LLC, Christopher Keefe, Randy G, DMI Media, Justin S, Mars Bohem, Charlene, Sarah Bork, and PXD Cookies. All getting Spaceflight Now memberships from Mark Otto. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including access to our member-only videos, as well as discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, and 4K live views of this and all the launches from the Cape. Keeping that generosity train going, Callistia Lee joining us once again on the stream, one of our channel members, batching Mark Otto, I should say, with another 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Those going to Duclaw Shep, Chris Bilberry. Sorry, the live chat's bouncing a little bit. That Opal guy, Crystal P, Chuck Johnson, Devin Kemrowski, excuse me, Viper Z, Laura O'Finney, all getting memberships from Callistia Lee. And Carl Maddock joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Thanks to Carl, and welcome to channel membership to all of those who are now joining us. T-minus 51 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. See the generosity train keeps going, with Space Pony also gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Those going to Air Force USA, Riv Minister, Sharon McVeigh, Cyber Guru Gaming, Search for Spock. Love that. Gosh, sorry, the live chat's bouncing a little bit. Juju Kiefer, Herbert Barron, and Eric Ross. So to all those who just got Spaceflight Now memberships, welcome. And be sure to thank Space Pony in the live chat. Really appreciate all the generosity this evening, you guys. Really, it's very lovely to see. And we will come back to the live chat in just a moment, but let's talk a little bit more about the mission on tap for tonight. Keeping the good weather streak going, launch forecast for tonight looked fairly favorable coming into this attempt. 45th Weather Squadron forecast 90% favorable odds of good weather at liftoff for this window. The only concern that they're watching is the cumulus cloud rule. They're also keeping an eye, as they were earlier this evening, on the upper level wind shear. If needed, the 24-hour backup opportunity for this launch does improve slightly. It's 95% favorable weather throughout that window. Although things seem to be on track with this mission. We'll talk about the launch timeline in just a moment here. But as a point of note, if they do start fueling, they are committing themselves to launching at 11:01 p.m. Eastern Time. If they don't start fueling, though, they do have multiple backup opportunities throughout this launch window, which goes until about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow morning. Now T-minus 49 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and step through the launch timeline for the Falcon 9 rocket. A little bit different than the Falcon Heavy that we just saw launch earlier this evening. First big milestone of the countdown is when the launch director makes the call from the go, no go pull for the start of propellant load. If that go ahead is given, then that begins at T-minus 35 minutes, with kerosene being loaded onto both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. Simultaneously, liquid oxygen also starts flowing aboard the first stage. At T plus 16 minutes, LOX starts loading onto the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Before that point, though, we'll see we call the big vent from the strong back. It's a good visual indication that fueling is on track for the Falcon 9 rocket, and it's a marker that happens when the feed lines are being chilled ahead of LOX load. T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. It's the process of flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps and protecting the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage. About 6 minutes ahead of liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. We'll start with the clamp arms opening up from just underneath the payload fairings on the rocket. Then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Sits there until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back at a much more rapid pace to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The launch director gives their go-ahead at T-minus 45 seconds. And then, of course, if all 9 engines are healthy and ignite, the engine ignition command, after being issued at T-minus 3 seconds. If the engines ignite, the flight computer gives the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9. That command issued at T0. At T0 time, currently targeting 11:01 p.m. Eastern Time. We're now at T-minus 46 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. T-minus 42 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Just about 4.5 minutes away from SpaceX making the call on the startup propellant load for tonight's Falcon 9 mission. Want to thank a few more folks in the live chat for their support. One of our regulars, Artemis, one of our channel members, with a very generous $100 super chat donation. Thank you, Artemis. Says, all right, lads and lasses, if we can match my donation here by launch time, I'll double it. The chat raises $100, I'll drop another 200. Let's do this, which is very generous, and respectfully, given the fact that we've already done more than an hour's worth of launch coverage up to now, my voice is not quite up for impersonations at this hour, but appreciate the request and the generosity there, Artemis. Thank you for that. T-minus 40 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Let's talk about the trajectory of this particular mission. Falcon 9, of course, launching from the pad at Slick 40 over Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. With this launch, as is the case with all of the Starlink missions heading to the Group 6 shell, this will be heading in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one on deck tonight is a short fall of gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites, and the fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of the map you see here on your screen. SpaceX using one of its 2 East Coast recovery ships to scoop up the fairing halves. Tonight on deck, they're using Bob. The other recovery vessel, Doug, was already in use tonight, much farther up the East Coast, catching the fairing halves from the Falcon Heavy launch earlier this evening. These 2 recovery vessels, named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo that flew the Demo 2 mission, kicking the Commercial Crew program into high gear back on May 30th, 2020. We're now T-minus 38 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away from the point at which SpaceX will make the call on the start of propellant load. We're now T-minus 35 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Coming up on the start of propellant load, assuming SpaceX has given the go-ahead just a few minutes ago. Again, that propellant load starts with both RP-1 loading on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket and liquid oxygen flowing aboard the first stage as well. And that prop load should be underway now. Starting to see a little bit of venting at the pad there. Good sign that we're getting into the fueling operations here. As we await for some additional signs of fueling, that vapor ring forming near the bottom of the Falcon 9 rocket. Want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Want to welcome both Carl Maddock and Lenny Richardson to channel membership at the pad leader level. Really appreciate y'all joining us. Thank you for the support. Cloudy with a $5 super chat donation. Thankfully telling me how to correctly pronounce their name, so thank you for that. Adds, love your coverage on YouTube, thanks. Well, thank you for helping to support that. Marcus Gallegos, or Gallegos. Apologies, Marcus, if I mispronounce your last name there. One of our channel members, gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships to Butterfly, Pure Intentional Elite, Miss Midwest America, Tracy Lee Wahlberg, JM, and Mark Totten. So if you haven't already, be sure to thank Marcus in the live chat for bringing you to channel membership. Hope you enjoy your time here and enjoy the live 4K views of this mission tonight. Want to echo Callistia Lee's message in her very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia. She says, time to hit the like button, y'all. Let's boost this live stream up. And yes, if you could be so kind as to hit the like button, that would be very much appreciated. T-minus 32 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Want to thank Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions for once again bringing us some fabulous live views of our moon this evening. Just about at a full moon tonight, on the other side of a full moon from yesterday. And if you haven't taken the time to check out the transit shot that our photographer Michael Kane got of the Falcon Heavy launch, that's over on his channel on X. We also shared it on our timeline on X as well. Now T-minus 31 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. Starting to see a little bit of vapor forming near the bottom of the rocket. Good sign that fueling is underway. As we approach T-minus 30 minutes, that's the point at which helium loading will begin. Be loaded into the pressure vessels on the first stage. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Again, that's coming up at T-minus 30 minutes. T-minus 30 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. As we enter into the final half hour before the launch of SpaceX's second mission of the day, let's go ahead and talk about the vehicle on tap and discuss a little bit more about the Falcon 9 rocket, the workhorse for SpaceX. Standing tall at 70 meters or 229 feet with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that made up by the first stage, the bottom 2/3 of the rocket. This particular first stage booster, tail number B1069, going for its 12th flight tonight. The base of that first stage, you see in that image on the right, the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, you see the black carbon fiber landing legs used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, tonight they're using a shortfall of gravitas. Of particular note, before we continue on with the rest of this rocket, early this week, of course, the remnants of booster 1058 made its way back to Port Canaveral after suffering a tip over, in which the majority of the booster was lost on its way back to Port Canaveral. This particular booster, when it flew for the first time back in 2021, after SpaceX saw that it was getting a little bit tippy, as one SpaceX official put it, they introduced self-leveling legs onto newer versions of the Falcon 9 rockets, including this particular booster, tail number 1069. However, some of the older ones, like 1058, didn't get the upgraded treatment, and so it was more susceptible to falling down as it did on its way back from its 19th launch. So, bit of an interesting tie-in between the booster that met its career end earlier this week and the booster that's flying tonight. Moving on up the Falcon 9, above the first stage, sits the inner stage. It's a composite structure which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. You see in the image on the right-hand side of your screen the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. In a first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release the latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also inside the inner stage is the second stage engine nozzle. It's housed there until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage, same as the first, is powered by both liquid oxygen and rocket-grade kerosene. It has a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine, which has a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. Produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. After that point, it will ignite for a third time after the deployment of the Starlink satellites for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it burns up, helping to eliminate the risk for unnecessary space debris. And finally, up top, the payload fairings housing the 23 Starlink satellites. They're made up of a carbon composite material and are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little bit further down range. Again, they are using the recovery vessel Bob tonight for this operation. Doug was already on tap, scooping up the fairing halves from the Falcon Heavy launch a little bit farther up north. U.S. Space Systems Command also studying Falcon reuse, or Falcon fairing reuse, I should say, for future national security missions, though they have not reused payload fairings to date. But it is something that they are studying, and as they have begun using pre-flown boosters, they're also looking at the opportunity to further cut costs potentially by reusing previously flown payload fairings. So I'll be keeping an eye on the mission when those first come into use. Let you know when that happens. Coming up on T-minus 25 minutes. At that point, cryogenic helium will be loaded onto the storage tanks on the second stage, similar to the process on the first. Now T-minus 23 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We're less than 3 minutes away from the start of the big vent as they chill down the feed lines ahead of the start of LOX load on the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Before we get to that point, I want to thank a few more folks for their wonderful support this evening. Marcus Gallegos with another $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Marcus. He says, here we go again. Hopefully another successful launch and landing. Thanks for all you guys do to keep us up to date. Also, chat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to show your support. Well, thank you for your support, Marcus. And yes, liking and sharing the stream is a great way to help support what we do as well. So thank you to everyone who already has liked the stream. And if you haven't, we would certainly appreciate it. Wade Nolly with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Wade. Chantel Kriegsman with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Chantel. Trish MC with a very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Trish. That's very kind. She says, great work this year, Team Spaceflight Now. Thanks for your continued wonderful work. I am wondering if this will be the last of these satellite launches this year. Well, this will be the penultimate launch of Starlink satellites, as we are expecting possibly one more from Vandenberg at the end of, on Saturday. However, that launch may slip to just the other side of the new year, so we will keep our eye on that. But if they, well, whatever they launch, we'll have live launch coverage of it, whether it's in 2023 or 2024. But this could be SpaceX's last of 2023. We shall see. Marcus Gallegos coming back in again with a $50 super chat. Simply saying double it. Well, thank you, Marcus. Really appreciate that. Magneto, one of my favorite names for a YouTube handle, is a big X-Men fan, with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Magneto. T-minus 20 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. See the start of the big vent here from the strong back. Those feed lines are being chilled. Coming up in just about 4 minutes is when LOX load will begin on the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. It is the last bit of fueling that has yet to begin. As the big event continues, I want to thank a few more folks for their contributions and support. Artemis coming back with a $200 super chat. Thank you, Artemis. Says, a man of my word. Keep the support coming, guys. Science is forever. Love y'all, and Happy New Year. Well, thank you, Artemis, so much for that, and keeping that support going with Felicia Gaffney with a $100 super chat. Matching up with Artemis. Thank you so much, Felicia. Really appreciate the support at that level. And after his support, Marcus Gallegos joining us at the pad leader level with channel membership. Thank you so much, Marcus. Welcome to channel membership. Artemis back again with another $100 super chat. Thank you, Artemis. He says, you know what? And I will just amend this slightly. Heck with it. It's the holidays. Let's do one more match. Thanks, Felicia, for being in the game. And thank you, Artemis, for encouraging support of our live coverage. We really appreciate that. As well as Callistia Lee and Marcus for gifting 10 and 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, respectively. Thank you to both of you, and for those who receive channel membership, be sure to thank them in the live chat as well. The T-minus 16 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. The big event wrapping up. LOX load on the second stage is about to begin. Let's talk a little bit about the payload on board the Falcon 9. The batch of 23 Starlink satellites heading up to low Earth orbit. You see there on your screen is a file photo of the Starlink V2 mini satellites, what they look like when they are stacked in their launch configuration. This photo was taken before another Starlink launch. Tonight will be the 43rd launch of these V2 minis. This is also the 63rd Starlink launch in 2023. Each of them weighs about 1,760 pounds or 800 kilograms. With the solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers and were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. Still to date, SpaceX has not published a rendering of what the V2 minis look like in their on-orbit configuration. We do have this photo that was captured by Australian company HEO Robotics from one of its satellites. This was taken earlier this year, and they claim this was the first direct observation of a Starlink V2 mini. You see those solar panels extending from the main body of the satellite. And T-minus 14 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 11 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. So we close in on the final 10 minutes of the count. Let's go ahead and step through this booster's history, as it'll be making its 12th flight tonight. This is booster tail number 1069. Its first launch was over at pad 39A. Happened on December 21st, 2021. It was the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-24 mission, sending up cargo and supplies and science up to the astronauts on board the International Space Station. And as previously mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this was also the mission after it landed on the drone ship and started heading back towards Cape Canaveral, which they saw was a little bit tippy, and they began to make the adjustments to make the landing legs a little more seaworthy. The next flight Coming up on August 28th, 2022, was the first Starlink launch for this particular booster. That was Starlink Group 4-23. The third launch came on October 15th, 2022, when it launched the Hopper 13F satellite. It and another Eutelsat satellite would go on to replace Hopper 8, 9, and 10, the company's 13-degree east position. The fourth launch came on December 8th, 2022. It was the launch of 15 for OneWeb, which sent up a batch of satellites for its internet constellation. Launch number 5 came on February 2nd, 2023. That was the Starlink 5-3 mission. Next up was a launch for Luxembourg-based company SES. The SES 18 and 19 satellites launched on March 17th. Then launches 7 through 11 were all Starlink missions coming into tonight's flight. Those include Starlink 5-6 on May 4th, 5-12 on June 23rd, 6-9 on August 11th, 6-19 on September 30th, 6-28, most recent, on November 18th. Which brings us, of course, to tonight's mission. Starlink Group 6-36. Getting ready to launch in 8 minutes and 48 seconds. The next milestone coming up is the engine chill-down sequence, which is set to begin at T-minus 7 minutes. As we approach that milestone, I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Agnes Amon with a $2 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Agnes. Valerie Jones with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Valerie. Saying simply, double me Artemis, to which Artemis responds with a $40 super chat, saying, Valerie, you got it. Thank you so much to the both of you. Natalie Florida EST with a $10 super chat donation. Thank you, Natalie. She says, for a great first launch, cheers to a successful second. We're very happy that we're able to be part of both your first and second launches that you're seeing. Trish MC with a $100 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Trish. It's very kind of you. She says, Happy New Year, Spaceflight Now. And Happy New Year indeed. 2024 is just right around the corner. Alan Gable, one of our channel members, marking 2 months at the PAL leader level. Glad to have you with us, Alan. Sean Wollock with a $20 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciate the support at that level. Charles Boyer with a $10 super chat says, a doubleheader is really on a happy Ian, maybe evening, I think is what that meant to say. Great job as always, Spaceflight Now. We really appreciate you guys. Well, thank you, Charles. Really appreciate your support. Mel Roberts Harold with a $5 super chat says, says, want to ask Mr. Harold if he'll pause Moneyball so I can see this launch on the big screen. Hopefully he will oblige. No, T-minus 5 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. We're coming up on strong back retract beginning in just about a minute from now. That process begins at T-minus 4.5 minutes. Time for, I think, a few more super chats between now and then. Alan Gable with a $10 super chat. Says, let's get Artemis to the top. Really appreciate that support. Thank you, Alan. 12Z Train with a $10 super chat. Thank you, 12. Lithium Battery Company with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Lithium. You say, awesome job tonight. Watching with my wife, Jenna. Well, hello to you both. Randall Laplant with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Randall. And we're just now coming up on the strong back retract sequence beginning. We're hearing some pad sounds now from Space Launch Complex 40. But getting those call-outs from Mission Audio as well. It's a little hard to see through the vapors, but those clamp arms underneath the payload fairings are opening up, and the transporter erector will start to lean back momentarily. Now T-minus 3 minutes, 37 seconds and counting.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And T-minus 2 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Hear that call out, Stage 1. LOX load is complete.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
We're now T-minus 1 minute, 29 seconds and counting before a liftoff.
Ground gas closeouts.
Things continue to remain on track for the on-time liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, now just a little over a minute out. And we've had a few more folks send in their support. Promise we will come back to that on the other side of the launch, so be sure to stick around. Get your kudos. We're now 50 seconds away from liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Waiting for the SpaceX launch director to go ahead and give their go for launch. That's coming up momentarily.
Go for launch.
And you hear that call that they are go for launch. Now just 30 seconds away from liftoff. "15 seconds. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 6-36 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. And is beginning its climb. Now 30 seconds into flight. "45 seconds into the mission. SpaceX able to notch its second liftoff of the evening. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin engines. Getting some great tracking views. This view from Pete Carson's and this from our tracking camera here at the press site. Now 1:20 into flight. Falcon 9 now passing through the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, max Q. Coming up on MVAC chill down, the point at which the second stage will thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine for ignition. Now 1:45 into flight. Now 2 minutes into flight, we're approaching main engine cutoff or MECO. The 9 Merlin engines will shut down, followed by stage separation and ignition of the upper stage engine. Jettison of the payload fairings will come shortly thereafter. And there's MECO. Stage separation. And ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Now coming up on 3 minutes into flight. That next milestone, fairing deployment. And you see those payload fairings falling away here in Pete's tracking camera views as they reflect off of the glow of the Merlin vacuum engine. Now 3.5 minutes into flight. The next milestone we're expecting is the first stage entry burn beginning. That's coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 9 seconds. Now passing 4 minutes into the flight, the Starlink 6-36 mission. Seeing some stars go by as we watch these tracking views.
Vehicle is following a nominal trajectory.
You hear the call out that Falcon 9 first and second stages following nominal trajectories. We're seeing views from both the tracking camera we have on the ground, thanks to P. Carson's, as well as the onboard cameras from SpaceX. The top box there, the first stage, is switched to a different view pointing down at the engines, which is why it's suddenly a good bit darker, because the Merlin engines have not ignited for that entry burn just yet. It's coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 9 seconds. We're taking views from Chuck Briggs' tracking camera here as we're awaiting the entry burn beginning. And there you see that on your
Stage
screen.
1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
From the position on the ground, the entry burn may be dipping in between some clouds, which is why it was a little bit brighter and darker in spots. That entry burn, though, wrapping up just in the last moment there in real time. Still continuing on the SpaceX screen.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
Coming up on our next
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
milestone, T plus 8 minutes 4 seconds. That's when the first stage landing burn will begin. It's a little too far out and too close to the horizon for our cameras on the ground to be able to see that, so we will pivot to the SpaceX cameras if need be.
Vehicle is following a nominal trajectory.
We're still getting views from Chuck Briggs of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine continuing on its burn. We will keep these tracking views up as long as we're able. Some great clarity here tonight. A little over 7.5 minutes into flight. Less than 30 seconds away from that landing burn beginning.
Stage 1 transonic.
Yeah, that call out for stage 1 coming transonic, meaning it's moving slower than the speed of sound. And again, just as a point of note, our countdown clock at the top, or our mission clock, I should say, the top right-hand corner of the screen, a little bit ahead of the SpaceX feed. That's because our clock is in real time, and the SpaceX clock in the stream is coming in on a slight delay. That landing burn set to begin
Stage 2 in terminal guidance.
a few seconds here.
Stage 1 landing burn.
We should see views from the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, come into view on the right-hand side of the screen.
Landing leg deploy.
With those landing legs out, Booster 1069 has completed
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
its 12th flight to date. Standing tall on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Coming up on second stage engine cutoff, SECO 1.
Pico.
That Merlin vacuum engine will cease firing for quite some time as it continues on in its parking orbit. It'll have a 1 second burn coming up at T plus 54 minutes 11 seconds. That'll set up the second stage for the satellite deployment. The Starlink satellites will head on their way at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds. A successful doubleheader for SpaceX tonight, as they were able to accomplish the launch and landings planned for both the Falcon Heavy mission as well as the Starlink mission on the Falcon 9 rocket. And if this does end up being the final mission for SpaceX in 2023, you can call it a fairly rousing success for them. As we see the fog start to settle in, SpaceX will shortly from now begin to bring that strong back up to its full upright position, as it is their new turnaround procedure to prepare this pad for its next planned mission, which is the Ovzon 3 satellite launch that's set to come up just on the other side of the new year. Looking at January 3rd for that mission. Before we go ahead and close things out, as promised, want to give folks their flowers for helping to support our second half of double launch coverage tonight. RC Flyboy 314 with a $10 super chat says, just watched the Heavy launch from about 12 miles and 8 at landing. Incredible. Thank you for your updates. Really appreciate it, and was very helpful for watching my family's first launch, which is excellent. We love being the source of good information for folks enjoying, whether it's their first, 40th, or more launch. We enjoy being a part of your launch viewing experience. Kevin Campbell with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that generosity. El Tremendo with a $2 super chat. Godspeed. Godspeed to you. Butterfly, one of our channel members, with a $2 super chat. Says, retired teacher trying to help out. Well, certainly that is very much appreciated, Butterfly. And, you know, just being with us for channel membership is also really very tremendously appreciated support. So thanks for adding on to that with an extra EV2 super chat. LTC with a $20 super chat. Thank you, LTC. Says, thank you from Jack's Beach, and keep up the good work in 2024. We certainly intend to. There's quite a lot to cover in 2024. So we're ready to buckle up and get into it. James McCurry with a $10 super chat. James says, Orlando resident and can see these from my front yard, but I love the commentary from all the way to the end. Well, thank you, James. We're glad we can add a little bit of extra context to your launch viewing experience. Russell Dietz joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Thank you, Russell. Hope you were able to do that before the launch and catch this one in 4K. And if not, you're now able to do that with all the other missions launching from the Cape. Andrew Lyons with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew says, all the way from Australia. Love the coverage. Thanks, guys. Glad to hear Australia's in the house. It's always fantastic to hear where people are watching our coverage from. Especially interesting to see some of our international viewers joining us. So hello to everyone joining from across the world. John Bobbitt with a $5 super chat. Thank you, John. John says, how do you find out what the flight trajectory is for each launch? In the run-up to these missions, as part of their safety precautions, they do publish hazard areas for where the booster will be flying, and so we are able to basically just connect the dots from where it's launching to where the hazard areas are, and then create a nice little graphic using the global views of Google Earth, and bada bing, bada boom. Thanks for the question, John. Nan with a $5 super chat says, I love watching launches from my house in Orlando while listening to your real-time sounds and commentary. Well, thank you for being with us this evening. Happy to bring those sights and sounds to you. Callistia Lee with another $10 super chat says, another stunning launch. Wholeheartedly agree. Good way to cap off space flight from the Cape in 2023. Fight Shrub with another $2 super chat. Says, here for Will's smooth, calm voice. You're great. Well, thank you, Fight. Really appreciate that. We'll look into that whole podcast thing down the road. Josh King, one of our channel members, with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Josh. Says, congrats to SpaceX on a doubleheader tonight. Yes, indeed. I know sometimes things can get in the way, and they'll try for the doubleheader, and sometimes things don't work out. Tonight, they were able to pull it off, so kudos to them. Callistia Lee gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you again for the generosity, Callistia. She adds later with a $20 super chat. Thank you again so much. Last round of gifts for 2023. More to come in 24. Happy New Year to Will, the mods, the Spaceflight Now staff, and the wonderful community here. See you all next year. And we certainly look forward to seeing you back again. And to Trinity, a.k.a. Mama T, joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Thank you, Trinity, for supporting us. Mike Digzek with a $2 super chat. Checking in from Titusville. Glad to have you with us, Mike. And the Gun Gorillas with a $2 super chat as well. Thank you, Gun Gorillas. And to close out our coverage, as we do with all of these launches, let's go ahead and give the rundown of the mission stats for tonight. This was the 12th flight of Falcon 9 booster number 1069, the 286th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 91st Falcon 9 launch of 2023. This was the 231st Falcon booster reflight, the 96th SpaceX orbital launch of 2023. This is the 97th SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 162nd SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40. The 217th overall orbital launch from Pad 40. And closing out the year for the Cape, the 72nd orbital launch from Cape Canaveral in 2023. Did see one more super chat come in from the Gun Gorillas. $5 super chat. Thank you. Says, amazing. Love watching from Tampa. Forgot the message last time. Well, no worries. Really appreciate you adding that in and helping to support our coverage. And we do have potentially one. Well, we were tracking potentially a Vandenberg launch coming up on the 30th, but it's looking like that may in fact slip to the other side of the new year. So very quite possibly this will be our last live launch coverage for 2023. And as we close this out, want to give a very sincere thank you to all of you who have been here supporting us at Spaceflight Now, whether it is through YouTube Super Chats, through channel membership, through sharing membership, or just checking out our launches live as we bring those to you. It is an honor and a privilege to be a part of a great team doing a lot of hardy work to make these live streams happen. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it has been amazing to watch this operation from here at the historic Fishbowl at the press site and be a little bit a part of it, bringing all these missions to you. So thanks to everyone who helped support us and to everyone on the team who's helped make it happen. To our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions, to Chuck Briggs for being readily willing to help with tracking all these launches throughout the year, to our ace photographers, Michael Kane and Adam Bernstein. Always appreciate your guys' hard work and amazing photographic eye. Naturally, to our editor, Stephen Young, for steering the ship in an exciting direction as we get more and more on our plate every year with the increasing amount of operations, not only launches themselves, but more things happening here around Florida's Space Coast and around the country that we are stepping up our coverage on and working hard to bring you good on the ground reporting in addition to the live launch coverage. And lastly, a big thanks to all of you at home for just being with us for all of our coverage, and look forward to bringing you a lot more in 2024. And I will agree with our last super chat on the stream. Mel Roberts Harold with another $2 super chat says, great way to wrap up 2023. And here to that. So for the last time in 2023, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. Have a happy and safe New Year's celebration, however you're deciding to ring in the new year. And we will see you in 2024. Good night.